Hello and welcome back to My Time with Lynn. This is episode 9. Never thought I'd necessarily make it this far, but it's really great. I'm overjoyed to have my good friend Chance back on the show. Hi, Chance.
Hello, hello, Spencer. Thank you for having me back again. It's an honor, big
Oh, it's
honor.
honor too. Same, feel the same way. I'm going to start off with a guest contribution because I want to make sure I get it in here. It is a poem written by someone who wants to be anonymous and someone who's, one of the joys of this whole process has been reconnecting with people. I hadn't talked to this person in many, many years, and he he came across the project, and we started talking about it, and he came across an old poem he wrote, and so this will be the first time Chance hears it too. And he uses the term LPAC, but to him it sort of represents the whole history because he was around before LPAC. So it's called LPAC's Unsung Song, and I'm sorry if I butcher it because I'm not the best at reading poetry, but so LPAC's Unsung Song. I learned to think in LPAC. I read the classics too, but every time I thought a thought, they told me it was not. I learned to sing in LPAC, the artful type of tune, but every time I sang a song, they told me it was wrong. I met my mate in LPAC, a pairing of two souls, but when we knew our love was true, they kicked us black and blue. I worked like hell for LPAC, but never earned a dime. I had no car, I had no house, nor ever any time. LaRouche, the sick mind's net spreads wide, o'er art and man and pesticide. But once you spot the fakery, he holds a living wake for thee. Oh, bedazzled, oh, benighted, minions can you still serve proud? What yet holds thee? What enfolds thee, wrapped as in a funeral shroud? First truth's a flicker, barely lighted, a glinting from a darkened corner. Then it kindles, flames and roaring, pain and joy, the heart restoring. So thank you for that anonymous contribution and just a word that anyone can contribute anything written. I'll read it. Uh, no judgment. I'll read anything. Test me. It could be like 4 pages of profanity, and we'll see what happens.
Good thing we don't have many trolls in our ranks. That's not something we kept around. That's a good one.
Yeah, we'll see. I wanted to start with a brief story because it was something we've been talking about recently.
Okay, well, hold on, wait. I just
Yeah,
have to ask you a
please.
question,
Yeah,
Spencer.
yeah,
Can we talk about that? That was pretty amazing, that poem
sure.
that you just read. I know that probably don't want to say who they are, but like, you're the kind of person I remember when we had these discussions in Percival, which we would have all the time. We would get into, these kind of longer, drawn out discussions about meaning and art, which I always really liked. And this felt like something that warrants that level of
Sure. I put it in the chat in case you want to reference it. No, it's very good. Um, yeah, I really appreciate the contribution for sure. And it's very heartfelt. And there's a lot of good, especially to an audience that doesn't know, you know, uh, anything that we did in this organization. It's, worked 18-hour days, 6 days a week for no money, for
yeah.
for room and board. Uh, we always had like company cars. We never really had like your own car. You never like owned a car, really. Maybe if you're like your parents gave you one or something, you'd have your own car kind of thing. Um, the one line. Let me
So the thing that really stands out, because I heard you read it, but now that I see the actual text, I can see the structure of it a lot more.
hmm
And the first four strophes, I think you call them strophes. Those first four lines are called a strophe. Um, it's talking about LPAC, 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 LPAC. You see it very clear, like it's written with like real, meaning.
Yeah.
And then and everything in that part about LPAC, it was like I resonated so strong with that. Like I learned to think, I learned classics too, but I was always told like, no, that's not what Lynn meant. You read a Lynn paper or something, like, no, Lynn, it's like it's just confusing. I can't understand Lynn's papers. It's like a Rorschach test. It means something different to everybody. Like,
Yeah.
and you're telling me your version is right because you've been in the organization longer, and it becomes this like, like, but there's certain things that were like indisputable, that you
hmm
couldn't really debate. Like, a Martin Luther King speech, or things that were more explicit. And it seems like the way they talk about music, the way they talk about love,
Hmm.
earning money, like all of those things resonated so strong with me. And then there's this shift, LaRouche, directly.
Sure.
The sick mind's net spreads wide. It's very critical of LaRouche. It's not like ambiguous, like artistic, like let you, it's no Rorschach here. The
Sure.
sick mind's net spreads wide. Like it's a very explicit statement.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people, like if they were to see this, they would be triggered by this part of it. Because the first part, I think, even if you were a member and you're still on good terms with the organization, you can relate. That's probably why you left. The first four strokes. It's like, yeah, I can do it.
Sure.
But that one where you say LaRouche, I think that's the one where it's like, I don't want to offend you. Maybe I don't say this, but this is art. Like we're going to be truthful. He says
Sure.
it, or she,
Yeah.
or whoever it is, they say it, and it's
Yeah.
like, that's always the issue when you're talking to ex-members. It's like you don't know if how they'll respond to that fifth line,
Sure.
and it creates this thing where it's like, I'm not sure I want to talk to them. He's an ex-member. I'm not sure because the fifth line is different for everybody. For
Sure.
this person, LaRouche is a sick mind who spreads the net, and that's what they think. That's what they think.
Sure.
And for somebody else, LaRouche was just like, somebody who was misunderstood and,
Sure.
he tried hard and people didn't listen to him, but he was ahead of his time. He was a genius.
Sure.
And to other people, Lynn was my father who never listened to me or whatever. It's like everybody has a different thing that for that fifth line, that fifth
Yeah.
strophe.
Hmm.
And I think that's the thing that makes us afraid to talk to former members. But it's only when you can say your fifth line the way that it sounds to you, and you know that the other person you're talking to isn't going to judge you,
Sure.
regardless of if it's not the same as theirs.
Hmm.
Not only will they not judge you, they're going to appreciate it. They're going to think about it. They're going to wonder what that means. They're going to
Yeah.
want to know more about you. It's only when you talk to somebody like you, Spencer, do you have the courage to put something like this out. And I think it's really amazing that you're doing this. Like you've given me a place to speak freely because I'm talking to you, to
Yeah.
Spencer. I'm not talking to former members.
Yeah.
I can't talk to them. I can't say the fifth line to a former member if I don't know them. And
Sure.
they're all listening, but talking to you is different because this is beautiful. This is art.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying nothing about the last two strokes, which I think need some time to be digested, but like,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Whoever did this.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll relay it to that person, of course. And he'll probably watch this. Yeah, it is. Thank you for that compliment. And I sort of mentioned it last time, and I mentioned it throughout the series, but like I'm really happy because I told you when we chatted the other day, like when I first started this project, I was not sure how it was going to go. I wasn't sure like I think I'm doing this for the right reasons, but like maybe I'm not. Like, psychology is an interesting, complex thing, and I was hoping I wasn't doing it for like personal, like egotistical or narcissistic, anything like that. I was like, I'm just trying to tell this story on one level. I'm trying to reconnect people. But part of it was sort of to this point you're talking about is like moving beyond this sort of shame and like vestiges of fear that were created for us. I like that the last part of that fifth strophe is once you spot the fakery, he holds a living wake for thee. I've brought that up many times over the show, like when I was comparing it in the military, for instance, right? If you're in a division of people, like whatever, 20 people roughly, and you come into a division, we have like a hail lunch. We go out for food, and we all like say, hey, welcome to the team. You know, we don't know who you are. We're glad to have you, and there's this sort of morale as a foundation. And then when you leave, no matter you can be a great sailor, you can be a dirtbag, low performing sailor, and you're gonna get like a going away gift from your team. And we're gonna have a dinner or like we're gonna go scout grab a lunch or something. Like, hey, Sailor X, thank you for coming with us. You'll be missed, right? And like this very loving sort of process, right? In the movement, it was the opposite. Like when someone left, like that guy is a piece of shit.
I
No,
always knew he was a dirtbag. I never liked him. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So what does that mean? Like, what is that about? Like,
I know. Like, yeah, we like and then I brought up, like they come out with all the dirt. Oh yeah, he was doing this anyway. Like they all the receipts come out. You're like, what? Like this is how you treat people that they, let's say they gave a decade of their life and now like what for whatever reasons they can't do it anymore, right? Might be family situation, any number of reasons
Yeah.
why they choose to leave and like, oh yeah, that guy was a total piece of shit and screw him. Or like, all right, so what's gonna happen when I leave? Like y'all are doing that when I leave? Like no matter what are my circumstances, you know? So that's that living wake is that's a great line, you know? Like you're dead. You are dead to us. You could have been with us for a month or 50 years. Doesn't matter. Once you cross that threshold, it's almost like the anti-hero's journey. Like you're now becoming an evil. You become the villain once you cross that threshold. So living wake,
Yeah.
that's a great image.
That's to be honest, that's cult stuff, man.
Sure,
That's cult stuff right there. And I know a lot of people don't like that. That's cult stuff right there.
sure,
That's one clear example of a few others I could think of, but that's a really clear one right there.
sure. And is yeah, I haven't, you know, in this show we've sort of come tangentially at the cult question. We've never talked about it like head on. Because there are parts of it, there are parts of the organization that were like anti-cult in a way, like in arguably, right? Like we studied Kepler for years, like what, like New Astronomy, Mysterium Cosmographicum, Harmonica Mundi. We studied them for years, and like I can tell you a lot about that work because I've studied it myself and I know it, right? A lot of people did that. You know, NASA picked up our website, like so that there's we had a degree of credibility and respect on things like that because we did the work. And to me, that's like an anti-cult thing, right? I'm not taking someone's word for it. I mean, like you're taking Lynn's word because he said we should do it, but the point was like epistemology to say like you know what you know, right? But on other sides, like you were bringing up a moment ago about like you know, okay, the movement, the first four strokes, the movement gave me these good things, but it was always tinged with like, but what's the correct interpretation? You know, like what does Lynn say? You can't go against what Lynn would say about it, and that's cultish. That's like
Yeah.
you can say, oh, he's the world's greatest genius. Okay, but like, can we discuss this topic he's bringing up? Like, is this are we making mistakes? You know, last time we brought up like the mustache and things. Like, there's some errors there. So I think that's good.
Yeah, man. I mean, the cult question is something that I'd love to get into. I'm following you.
Okay.
Because this is like I'm just talking to my friend. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And there's so many things that you've gathered from guests, from you wanted to share something else I know, and you just read this beautiful poem. I just want to hear like what it is that you wanted to start with, because I think you had this idea you mentioned about the hero's journey, which
Yeah. Yeah. Quick. I mean, kind of like, sure. I'll go through this brief thing because I know we don't have a ton of time today. I'll say this publicly. People loved our first interview. They wanted more, and I think it was because like you know like you mentioned, we're friends, we're just talking, and we're able to trust each other and be vulnerable and bring up these things, which is good. And I do think it is like part of that journey towards people. Like I'd like that point you made about like you're not sure what people think about that fifth stroke. Like where are you at? Like you know you're an ex-member. Maybe you left 10, 20 years ago, but like are we in the same page? Can we talk? Can we be honest? Like are you still an acolyte even though you left? Like, do you still believe it? Like, a friend reminded me, after World War II, there was these like a few instances. One famous case of this Japanese soldier who's on this, I forget which island, might have been the Philippines or something, but he never believed the stories that Japan lost, and so he kept fighting the war. He was like killing villagers until the 1970s. They
killing villagers,
killing,
he was killing people.
he still thought the war was on. He
Wow.
like I think he had a samurai sword and he's just like living in the cave and foraging in the forest. And they had to get there's an episode of Hardcore History, the podcast, that kind of a good one. Um, they had to get his old lieutenant, who's now like an accountant or something, like, hey, the Japanese government needs you. You got to get on a plane right now. And it's like, okay, sure. It's like, what am I doing? We'll tell you when we get there. And he goes to this island and it's like, yeah, you're one of your soldiers does not believe the war is over and is like still on his own just fighting this fight and like killing people with samurai swords into the 1970s, right? We're like, yeah, we're past the Nixon impeachment, you know. he
Jesus.
he wasn't aware
This is
like
this is incredible.
the Apollo program is like come and gone, you know. And so villagers were like putting out newspapers for him to see like, hey, like, you know, the war's over. and he had this thing about like since he could see in the newspapers that Tokyo was still existed, he's like, well, the Japanese government would never capitulate. They would never surrender if Tokyo was still around. So that tells me it's just this is just propaganda. This is just those wily Americans trying to confuse me so I surrender, but I'll never surrender, you know? So they were able to talk him down and like get him back into society, and they interviewed him and stuff. So, but I think you still have some people like that that are like, I know I still believe it, whatever. So you never know if that's a kind of person that you're going to be
Wow,
talking to.
man. You just went like into Jungian territory right there. The way you
Sure.
described that, like it, because I mean, if I didn't really honestly, I didn't consider that that could have been a possibility for why someone would have such a hostile reaction to the cult topic, even though they're not in the organization anymore. But that kind of, you know, I think it goes in that direction. It creates an opening for us to have more compassion
I think
instead of
so.
being judgmental towards people who have a hard time saying anything critical about the organization.
Yeah, and I think it works the other way too if they think that maybe that's what you think too. And that's it's like it comes it's a predictable result of the way we treated people when they left. And like I've harped on it again and again. And it's like either you're doing this full time or you're fundamentally immoral. It's super binary, right? And I talked before about the Muslim laws, right? If you're not aware of what Lynn's ideas are, then you're neutral. You're neutral in the eyes of God. If you come in, then you're a golden soul, and no matter your faults, you're absolved, and you're doing the Lord's work. And once you leave, you're evil. Not just you're
Mm,
neutral. Like you could even be
mm.
supportive philosophically. You could even like be donating or coming to events or whatever,
I mean, there
right?
was a point when I remember thinking that way. The way you're describing that, I remember thinking that way.
Yep.
I remember like that made sense to me. It felt very, it made things simpler and easier to make sense of.
Sure.
It was too much. I was trying to understand Kepler and like, how to sing a Lydian and, box, like it's too much stuff to figure out. I don't have time to be trying to figure out who's my friend from my old group and who's not. Like, I just don't
Sure.
have time. So that simplified things so that I could use all my bandwidth trying to understand Lynn's latest paper, which was really hard to understand,
Yeah.
and there were some really good ideas, but it was a lot of things that was just like, what is he talking about? Like this is not making sense to me.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah. And it gets to sort of that fifth strophe again about like the point you made. Because some people and all kinds of people have all kinds of different views about it, but like, was it Lynn? Was it just the organizational structure? And so what we're kind of raising with this poem here, this contribution was like this person saying like, no, like Lynn was the cause of it. And it, from his perspective, it only makes sense, right? He's been the boss of the company for since the 60s. So it was what, 60 years? 60 years this run of this organization, and you don't think the leader has the control over it? Like that's hard to argue. Like, oh no, it's the lieutenants took over, it's like a I don't know, um, Hitler in the bunker kind of thing, or like Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson got sick and his wife was just running the White House, for like
Hmm.
for like a year, kind of thing. So that's a good point too.
So can I ask you one question?
Mhm.
I know you want to keep going with this, and I want to hear where it's going to go, but this question just keeps coming up, and I feel like you're the right person to talk to about it. Um, is there anything anybody could have told you when you were at that point in the organization? Because I know I was at that point. Maybe you never got there. You seem like you maintained a lot more like self-awareness than I did. But I remember being at a point where it was like, if Lynn said we need to, dig up, our backyard to build a bunker because World War III is going to happen, like I would have done it. I would have been like calling my aunt and been like, hey, you need to like World War III is going to come. Like there was a point where I was like that into it. And I'm thinking like when I was at that point, there is nothing anybody could have said. Literally nothing anybody could have said to convince me how, you know, this is probably not healthy. Like maybe there's a different way to resolve this immediate danger that you're trying to describe.
Hmm.
And even if I think of myself right now, like right now, who I am, I can't think of anything I could have told my earlier self that would have changed. And what I'm trying to express is like part of the reason why I don't like talking about the cult subject personally is because for those people who are still in it, it does nothing to help them. It actually pushes them deeper, I feel like. And so it's almost like a part of me that's like, I don't want to be another voice telling them that they're dumb and they need to wake up and get out of like that's not like this is an incredibly intelligent, person who is committed to doing good. They're so committed to doing good that they're willing to endure those first four strokes
Yeah.
every day until they finally develop their own fifth one. But
Hmm.
at this point, that fifth one is being provided by the organization. It's telling them what to think about this.
Yeah. It's the really tricky, I think. Yeah, I brought up, we were talking the other day. It's hard because like individually, to an outside observer, like the level of sacrifices the people in the organization make, as sort of those first four strokes indicated, like it's hard to understand it. Like it makes no sense. I think this has been a concept that's been discussed in the movement for a long time. You have young people that are putting in 18-hour days, 6 days a week, no pay because they believe it, and they're much more organized, and they're accomplishing all of these things in the realm of politics that, you know, there's no like the Democratic youth movement, like the young Democrats are never going to accomplish the things we accomplished, right? Um, and maybe that's different now, but it's hard to understand like why they would do that and why they would be so committed. So it's tricky. I kind of forget where I was going with that. Oh, but you were kind of asking about my story a little bit, and mine I think was maybe a little unique because I wanted to join the movement before I met the organization. So I had this manager at this. I worked in this pizza shop in Tacoma. He was one of my managers, and he was very philosophical and a very I could tell a brilliant guy. And he was like the most unique thinker I'd met. And I was motivated by the Iraq War, and I thought that neoconservatism was not a good idea. But I really didn't know much of anything. I just knew I felt I needed to help. I'm like I'm in a position where I don't really have any obligations. I'm young. I'm single. I'm in college, but I'm just phoning it in. I don't care. I could care less. I was smart enough to get through college, but like I had no motivation to do it. Like why would I do this? There's the world is changing. The world is going through these momentous shifts, and why am I not contributing to trying to solve it? And so neoconservatism was seemed like a mistake to me. 22 years later, and I can tell you absolutely it was a mistake. It's been a terrible thing. So he was telling me, this manager of mine, a good friend, about this organization, and they were like young people who were trying to do these things politically, but they also were trying to develop the culture. I'm like, that sounds amazing. And he started giving me some of the writings, and like, this is great. Like, I want to do this, and I just want to meet them so that I can know if they're crazy or not. If they're not crazy enough that I could work with them,
Mm,
that I can contribute something and make them better. And
mm,
he's still telling like, yeah, they got some problems, they got some issues, but he's like, it's new. I joined in 2003. The youth movement was still very, very young, right? It sort of started in
mm,
2000, like 2001, 2002 is when it really started exploding, and I was part of that
mm,
sort of first or second wave. And so that was always my question, like, can I work with these people? Can I help them out, or or like, are they reasonable? Can I, And I didn't know, I was ignorant in general. But then that's kind of the you know, fast forwarding to the end there, it's like, okay, what is the breaking point when you realize like this is when you're asking like when is it too much? What would be too much for you?
mm,
And I just saw the collapse. There's a lot. The organization was collapsing. The membership had like left in huge degree, and I saw that there was no real forward plan for how it was going to continue after Lynn's death because he
mm,
was pretty sick at that time. And so my critiques were more structural. They were more like, and I told myself it was funny. A friend of mine, um, and he and I got really into like Michael Moore. Like Michael Moore had this old show, and he was like doing these funny like interventions where like he ran a ficus tree for city council in Detroit, and like it probably won. Like it probably like
Wait,
legitimately
what's a ficus tree? What's
just
that?
it's a tree. It's like a tree you have in an office, like a small little tree.
You said he ran one or
He ran one for office. For if like he was able to get it on the ballot
oh wait, you mean like he actually had a tree
that was running for
as a
office.
candidate that he was able to okay, all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Because he was just making the point, like, you know, like, because people would say, oh, well, this person's been a city councilman for 10 years. He's obviously doing good. And Michael Moore's point is like, no, it's just because no one else is really running against them. So he's like, what if I just ran an inanimate object against that person?
Wow.
And so he ended up getting it on the ballot. Like he ran a campaign, ficus for council or whatever. And
What?
he put the ficus tree in the back of a pickup truck and drove it around. And like, and I think like based on the counts, like it probably won office. It probably like, and partially it's like the joke sort of troll aspect of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But he would do things like that, and I was like, this is great. And this friend of mine and I were like getting into that in sort of in 2002, 2003, and we said like, hey, let's dedicate our lives to politics because we can help
Wow.
people. And so I did that.
Wow.
I did that before I knew about the movement or anything, because I'd felt just a moral obligation. Like, like I said, I'm sort of in a position of privilege, like middle class white kid, Tacoma, Washington, um, intelligent enough, but like no obligation. So why wouldn't I dedicate my life to helping the world in the best way I could? And I
Oh
said at
man.
and I said at that time, like I'll do it as long as I can do it where I don't have to like morally compromise. And I thought in my head, it's like, well, I'll have to just become like a congressman and work my way up and like just figure out how. And I didn't even like have a specific idea. It was just more, I want to help the world. And that's is very idealistic, whatever. And so that was, it's like, I'll do it until as long as I can before I feel like I'm having to compromise my morals. And so that was all into played into like why I chose to ultimately left. Like, okay, there's
So wait a
I
minute, because did you have this idea already before you even heard of the organization that you were going to be in office and you were going to serve a position in office until you felt you were morally compromised? You had already
yeah,
set those as the terms for breaking off before you even heard of the organization.
yep. And then
That
I
is
and then I met the
interesting.
yeah,
Wow.
then I met the organization. I was like, all right, yeah, this is the group. Cool. Like in my head, I was like, all right, cool. Someone already did it. Someone already started it before me. Like someone already
Oh, wow. Wow. That's so interesting. Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
see how that, yeah.
So like okay, cool. Like this is because I was like I didn't think there's any group like that because I was like the Democrats suck, the Republicans suck. Like uh, Ralph Nader was still a big thing at the time. He was a crucial factor in the 2000 election with Gore and Bush. And like this guy's a joke. It's like nothing was going on. The socialists were like have always been a joke. It's like
Yeah.
no way I'm working with them. I knew that because I grew up in the Northwest, so like
Yeah.
you meet
Wow.
them all. So like I made that decision before, and then I met them. Like all right, cool. Like someone's already doing it. I'll just be able to work with them, and I'll contribute where I can. I'll figure out what they're about. I'll learn their stuff, and it was all appealing. And it was appealing to me that you didn't have to like like in Congress in college you got like choose a major. And I was like, well, but I love history and philosophy and science and music and art, and like I don't want to choose. And so the movement is like, no, you shouldn't choose. I was like, that's smart. I was like, that's always what I thought instinctively. Like, why would like you need to study everything? I
Yeah.
was like, and that's what you guys are doing. Cool. You guys are like, and I went to one day of a cadre school. Um, and I met a dude, I can say his name, Jared. Jared, who's like one of my really good friends. And we got there super early, and he's doing qigong out in the middle of this field.
Wow.
And I had been doing qigong with this. I was in a Shaolin school at the time, and I was like, okay, that's cool. And he was a very thoughtful guy, and he was very sweet. Just a great guy. Jared is a great dude, and I don't mind saying that. Dominant him out. And then like it was just the last day of cadre school, and Phil Rubenstein gave a cool briefing on like Iran Contra, how it played into the Iraq War. Harley did this class on Beethoven versus the Beatles, which was hilarious. And I was a big Beatles fan at the time, and I realized just how shallow their lyrics were. Like you're right. Like I can't argue that. Like their lyrics are insanely shallow and stupid
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
compared to Beethoven, because he went this whole thing of Beethoven. I was like, yeah, like, and it made me like, wow, I don't know anything. I thought I knew about music or something, but like, I don't know anything. These people are like way smarter than I am, way more knowledgeable. And so then I was like, and then I met enough of the people. I'm like, all right, these guys are kind of kooky, the youth, but I can work with them. And so I forget, well, it's Rachel. She was like, when are you gonna come? Like, when are you gonna come out and organize? And um, it was hilarious because years later, I mean, 7 years later, I was one of the key people running her congressional campaign in Boston, which is one of my favorite memories because we kicked out Barney Frank, who was just one of the most awful congressmen you could imagine.
Yeah,
And
okay.
that's one of my like favorite positive things we did,
Yeah.
because I was a key part of that. But so yeah, she says, when are you going to come out? And I think like I helped drop them off at one of their houses, and it was on the same block as this girl I knew from college, from my friends out in Washington State. I was like, that's funny. Like I know how to get here. And a couple weeks later, I didn't even call them. I just took a bus and showed up at their house. I was like, hey, I'm here to organize. And like I brought some clothes and I just stayed for a couple weeks and organized.
Whoa, that
Yeah,
is such a different story than anything I've ever heard.
yeah, and they're like, "Oh, hey, what's up? Like, we remember you." And then like, "Oh, we're going to the office." And it was this office in Kenmore, Washington. It looked like a crack house. We called it the crack house. It
It
was
seems
such
like every local had a crack house somewhere that they would like do something close to like organize or something. Like,
it looked like a house, like if there was going to be a house in like World War I era where you had like an anarchist group who were like gonna bomb the Serbians or something. That's what it looked like. It was just like this dingy, but to me, I'm like, man, this is cool. This is like this revolutionary. I'm like, yeah, we have nothing, and we're gonna go out there and fight. So it was really cool for that. Yeah, so that's part of how I joined for sure. Yeah, but that was always my idea. Like, can I help these people? And then really a lot of it at the end was like, because I'd worked my way up into a position where I had some sort of credibility to say certain things, and then they just weren't listening. And I could tell not only were they not listening, but there was no structure for them to listen. There was no plan for what to do after Lynn passed, and that became evident with the civil war that happened later. The split in the two sides, which is just
yeah.
like speaks a lot about the structural failures that they had. But anyway, I'm kind of going on tangent there. But
Can I say something, man? Because
yeah,
I remember when you first came to Percival, I remember having this feeling like there's something about this guy that's different. Like he's not like I don't know, he doesn't quite fit in, but like wherever he is, he adds something like really valuable. He knows a lot of stuff about a lot of different things. You could talk to him about anything. And then you ended up in the animation room, and I was like, there's something about where this guy is sitting in the animation room, which feels like a really important anchor. Like it was like in the corner of the room. Like when you first go in the room, the first person you see is Merv in the fish tank and maybe Hector, which is kind of like, okay, this is where like most of the quote unquote work to keep the thing floating is happening. And then right when you turn to the left, you see the anchor, and then you turn a little bit more to the left and you see Yada to me and the crazy, animation stuff. But it was like there was this anchor. And I think your energy, I remember when you first came in, I was like, this guy keeps talking about stuff that nobody cares about. But it's like, it's really good to hear it. It's really important, you know? And then over time, like the more I listened to him, I was like, man, nobody cares about what he's talking about. Like, this is actually really important. And then you were like, yeah, I know. It's like, it took me a long time to realize that. But you just like, you were fine with knowing that what you were doing was important and knowing that most people didn't really care. Like you were not doing it for that until eventually there was, what you said, like
yeah,
there was nobody listening and there was no room for change. And then suddenly it becomes this clear line that you drew before you heard of the organization, I'm not
yeah,
being compromised. Like, well, then there you go.
yeah. Don't forget, Diana was in there too.
There's no way to forget Diana.
I know,
There
I
is
know,
no way to forget Diana.
I know. What
There is no way to forget Diana.
I mean,
Diana was like she was the necessary shift in energy when she first came.
yeah,
Diana, like it was, and then you came after. You were like in the same place with Diana. Like y'all were both
yeah,
in that corner
yeah.
there. Yeah,
No, we talked about it a little bit last episode, but that room and that period was like it'll be one of my favorite periods of life. It was
yeah,
just
me too.
it was such
Me too.
everyone there was so unique. They had such different gifts, and we all had such a passion. I wish people could see it. I wish people could see I mean, where else do you see it? I mean, maybe in like, I don't know, animation studios or something, or artistic endeavors, but like these young people that all have these wildly different, brilliant talents, um, all contributing, all passionate about it, doing it because they wanted to do it, not because they were getting paid, really no other, no other reason than like this. We're making something beautiful. We're making these products that are going to help people learn and understand and appreciate beauty. And, like there's so many aspects to it, So it's hard, and that's one of those. It's so nuanced, like we talked about last time. Like that's a beautiful experience, and that's like, um, in many ways, I don't know if it's opposite of cult, but it's just like it's more just like the highest. Where else can you get that experience, and what's better than that kind of experience? That's like a fellowship of people around a concept, not because we're any reason than we wanted to do it, and to reconcile that with all the difficulties and all the the negative energy and some of the evil with the other aspects of the organization, it can be hard to reconcile. And it's
Yeah.
all the more reason to like connect people on moving beyond the shame and just being able to talk about it and show how nuanced it was. So I know you only have like 20 minutes left, but
No, no, no. I just got a phone call. That's not me looking at time. That's me
okay.
just trying to see if this person is going to keep calling because then I'll take my watch off.
And
That's actually kind of annoying.
it leads me into this point I did want to make, and I'll spare this. We don't have time for the whole story, but like um, thinking about it mythologically, this is episode 9, so people can go back and watch these different episodes with different people and their experiences. But to me, I've always had a certain hypothesis, and it's just sort of been confirmed the more I do these interviews. And it's just a hypothesis. I could be wrong, but it's this idea that individuals in the movement followed a kind of hero's journey, right? Like my story is just one story. You shared your story. Most of my guests I like to ask like, how did you join? Because that's interesting, and it's something called you to action. You know, and it's the Joseph Campbell, this book, A Hero of a Thousand Faces. He was like a student of Jung. He sort of codified it in a way, but it's this idea that you're this nobody, you're this peasant farmer's aide. Like you're working on a little farm in podunk country nowhere, and then somehow you get some call. You get a shooting star or a vision in a dream or whatever it is, some call to action that you need to leave the comfort of your little village and you need to go out into the world because there's a dragon that's terrorizing the kingdom, and you, little humble nobody with no skills, need to defeat the most terrible dragon in the world in the kingdom. You need to defeat it, and you need to figure out how to do it on the way. You're gonna early on you're going to be visited by a wise sage who's going to give you advice, and you might say no to the call initially, right? Anyway, and then hopefully in the hero's journey you're going to beat that dragon. You're going to become a self master. You're going to master yourself and your own concepts and processes. You're going to beat that dragon, and then you're going to get the damsel and the gold. That you're going to get the treasure that the dragon has been shielding and holding, and then you're going to free the the whole kingdom from this terror, right? And I think that's what people did, in their own way. Maybe you remember for a month, a year, 30 years, 40 years, you were trying to do the best you could. You were trying to slay the greatest dragon. For me, it was like initially took the form of neoconservatism, and this foreign policy is like our country's going the wrong way. But it was also the idea that we're building this culture and beauty and such. And then eventually the hero's journey, you return home. This is my favorite example is the end of the Lord of the Rings. Samwise and Frodo come back to Hobbiton, and
Mm.
Sam was such a lovely character. Um, Carrying Frodo up Mount. I can't carry the ring, but I can carry you. And it is like he's such an inspiring character. And then he comes back, and they're just in this little bar, and like no one knows what they did. Like no one knows that they saved the universe.
Oh, that's true.
And
Yeah, I
there's
remember
there's
that.
and there's the barmaid that he loved, but he's like too like he just helped defeat Sauron, but he can't ask this girl out, So, but he has to. So you come back across the threshold back to your village, and now you're the master of two worlds, because you have to master that as well. And so then lovely scene at the end, of the Return of the King, where you know, they get married and they have a little daughter. Samwise is holding his little daughter with little ringlets, you know.
Wow.
So that's I think most people's experience that I've talked to. They took a kind of hero's journey. Doesn't mean like they were Heracles, or Theseus or something. They weren't Samwise necessarily, but they tried. They tried to do it. And that alone warrants our admiration, I think. So you have this hero's journey for people. At the same time, you have this other mythology of the organization being a kind of tragedy.
Mm, mm.
You see this slow collapse. We talked about it with that documentary film, The Inchon Landing, right? You kind of get the feel.
Incredible, incredible documentary. Let's not just let that sit a little bit because literally it's like top three of favorite documentaries we produce in the organization.
Thank you, man. Yeah,
Facts,
I'm really proud.
facts.
I'm really proud of it. Me and my friend Oscar did it, and it was a labor of love. And she wrote it. I just helped produce and edit it. But so maybe some of those editorial challenges. But just that scene at the end, it's this. We're playing this music, which is a funeral, but you're seeing a celebration of MacArthur. He's coming. He hasn't been in the United States for 40 years. Truman fired him. There's this tragic arc of the country because the British and intelligence agents kicked out Henry Wallace from being FDR's VP. Now Truman is put in because he's just controllable and he's a moron. They showed in that Oppenheimer movie too, just what a fool this guy was.
Yeah, never
Uh,
don't invite this guy in again. He's too sensitive or whatever they say when he leaves that
yeah, yeah,
meeting.
yeah, yeah. What a
I dropped the bomb.
yeah,
I dropped it, not
I did.
you.
I
It's like,
know.
yeah.
Yeah. So you have those two. To me, those are two conflicting mythologies, and I think talking to people that maybe have had more difficulty processing their experience have found it useful to kind of look at that hero's journey, but
Wow.
also you're within a tragic arc. And so they think, I think sometimes people they adopt the tragedy as their story when
Yes.
it's not really their story. They have a hero story. And that's been a long-term hypothesis of the show to show how individuals like yourself and others to show your hero's journey, how you got there, right?
Well, I didn't know you were doing that. It makes sense that that's because I always felt just really safe talking about my experience with you, and I refer to you as a lighthouse. We were chatting a little bit before we record. It's like a lot of people feel that way. You know, they feel like, okay, there's this fifth strophe that I'm starting to get a feeling of, and I don't know who to talk to about it. And sometimes you got to be able to reflect on it with someone. And I think being able to process those three strikes I talked about in the first video as happening within a tragedy, a setting that I was in. The organization was a tragic setting, and I could situate my experience as me having an experience within that, and not let those three strikes be the painting I make of myself from an artistic perspective. The way you're talking about the hero's journey is it allows me to be who I am separate from the tragedy that I'm a part of. And I think that that's the thing that is really hard when you're in, a kind of a cult, and I'm trying to not use that word, but like it's the most appropriate word. It's like you don't know where your decision making ends and where the imposition of this tragic element begins. It's hard to make those distinctions. And being able to talk to somebody like who's not going to judge you gives you the ability to make that. So
That's the key, and it I appreciate that. And it came up with my discussion with Jessica too, which also people really love that interview as well. It's very, very honest, and I'm really grateful she's able to come and be on the show. But it's moving beyond that shame, and she made the point about like because we were talking about the organization as it stands currently, and she said like what organization? Like what like that what's going on now is not what we did. Like there's shades of it, you know, there's like a outward form that resembles it. And again, this is not to be negative about those individuals because I think they still are doing what they think are noble things. This is not against them as people, and I'm not trying to get them to leave. I don't care. If you're happy, be happy. This is more about the story of the whole thing, and more centered on people that left, but they know they're invited on at any point. But it's just them. It's just recognizing that and moving beyond the idea that like what any individual member did is shameful or wrong or something. Some other time I got a story about, well, I told you the other day I was in this emergency situation at work. This guy had a stroke and I helped like stop his bleeding for a while. He ended up dying like when he got to the hospital or on route. But it reminded me of when I was like 15 years previous, like 2010-ish. It was mustache time, and I was in University of Washington, um, the Avenue right by UW. Someone came and spray painted our sign. I went after him to get a photo of him. We got in a fist fight. He knocked me with a can of spray paint on my head. I got knocked back, cut him on my head. So it just reminded me of the time when I was bleeding profusely on a sidewalk 15 years
Wow.
before. Yeah. Um, 11 stitches. And and there's a whole story behind it, but I was in the hospital and Phil Rubenstein gives me a call. And I was pretty distraught because I mean, it was just wild, a wild part of my life. But Phil said this thing. I love Phil Rubenstein is one of those people like golden soul, dude.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
just beautiful human being. You love him. I wish there was a website with just like his writings and speeches, his classes. Like that would just be fascinating for everybody because the dude is so amazing. And he's one of those people. Like he's one of Lynn's top lieutenants, and he's just like a beautiful person who tried to help people. You know, I'm not here to criticize at all because Phil was super well loved and very deservedly so, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he calls me. I'm in the hospital room, and I think I just got my stitches. And I was like, "Hey, Phil, like, I was kind of like crying a little bit, and I was like, I just feel embarrassed, like, I did the wrong thing." And he's like, "No, you like, maybe you made some tactical mistakes, but you're not, but never be ashamed of doing the right thing. It's like
Mm.
you were doing like, I shouldn't have chased after the guy. The guy was like 6'5", by the way, just in my defense, you know."
Just saying, like,
Yeah, just
okay.
saying, that wasn't quite fair. Wasn't quite fair. Um, and these two gals who were they just left ballet practice. They gave me their ballet shirts to like sop up the blood,
Oh wow.
which is sweet. And I was in the ambulance with this young gal, I won't say her name, and she was pretty freaked out because obviously like we know each other for a long time, and I'm just like profusely bleeding out of my head, not a good look. And it said, "Hey, like I need this, like I need a hole in the head." She did not think it was funny. I'm like, that's pretty funny. But no, Phil was saying that like, never be ashamed of doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that like that thing I did was like the greatest or whatever, but it was
No,
more like,
I get where you're getting at. Yeah.
yeah, it's more like all these people are like sacrificing so much to do something they think has value, and society doesn't know how to place that. You know, they'll see us on the street and like pity us, like, oh, these kids are brainwashed, and partially we were, but also like we were trying to change the world. We were trying to do something good. We were trying to sacrifice to save the kingdom, you know? So I never want, I just say that because I never want to, I'm never criticizing people.
Yeah.
That's not what it's about.
Yeah, I
It's,
don't think like that's why I'm saying like I'm talking to you, so I'm
yeah,
not going to give any of those parentheticals because I think you and I have an understanding that we're not trying to like go after people.
yeah,
If I try to like talk in a way that's addressing people who are still in the organization, then it's not going to be a real talk anymore. I'm going to be like talking. I'm not going to do that. But
yeah, yeah.
um, can I ask you though, like after that encounter, did you feel more committed to the organization, or were you a little more on the fence? Like maybe I should think about what I'm doing here, or did it not have an impact on your commitment?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. So it was at a time, especially the mustache period, when we talked about in the last episode. It was a period of like, I think we were making a lot of mistakes as an organization. We really were like losing people. We were losing our youth movement. It was a period of like intense physical attacks, right? Like I mean, me getting 11 stitches was like nothing compared to what other people were like. People were trying to be run over. A good friend was hit in the head with a lead pipe, and like it really changed his life for the worse. Um, People are starting to take self-defense classes, because there was just like a frenzied energy and just the whole landscape changed. And I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I think it probably was more like I became more like trigger shy. I became more like defensive because I knew that potential was out there. There's a danger to the world. But I think I probably rationalized it in terms of like, well, we're doing the right thing kind of thing. But it did have doubts. I did have doubts. Not as
Yeah,
much because that was a period where a lot of people left, and I stuck around for years later, right? So that says at
yeah.
least something about my intent. And but it was like from that early get-go, it was like, I want to reform them, you know? I want to like stay with this group as long as it makes sense morally. So I'm sure I rationalized it.
You know what's interesting? Because I feel like that experience you had is an experience I had as well. It didn't involve a hospital, but I remember being in Detroit, and it was when Obama was still running for president. Or he might have just won. I can't remember. I think he was running. And it started to become in the newspaper that his reverend was racist, like Reverend Wright. You remember?
Yeah, yeah, Chicago.
Oh,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
brothers and sisters, you got to protect yourself from the white devil and da, 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 da. He was like hardcore, like
yeah.
Southern kind of. And Obama, it was like they found a video where he was like in the audience, and they were like trying to use that to say, look at, Obama's a racist, he's a racist. And eventually Obama stopped, going to that church because that guy was kind of crazy. Like, to be honest, he was saying some things that needed to be said, but it was very, very hateful, very
Sure.
hateful. And I remember we came up with this deployment where we were going to put KKK uniforms on, and they wanted the black people to wear the KKK uniforms because if it was the white people wearing it, people would be confused. And the black people in Detroit that they chose, and I don't want to say their names, but
Sure.
like it wasn't always easy for them to stand up for themselves, and they were like, "Yeah, okay, I'm gonna do it then. Okay, I do it." And I didn't like that. I was like, no, he's not going to put that on. I remember as a new member being like, no, don't tell him to do that. And he
Sure.
was like, no, it's okay. I can do it, man. I can do it. And the other guy was like, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to have fun. And I could see in their eyes like they were just like scared. They
Sure.
didn't want to do it. I could tell they didn't want to do it. But there was this thing in the atmosphere, like, Lynn was saying this, and we got to show that we support it.
Hmm.
And I remember they went out with those things. And because I wanted to protect them, I said, I'm going to dress up like the Reverend and I'm going to do the crazy preaching because I
Yeah.
didn't want to have them out there by themselves just standing there with a sign. That didn't make any sense.
Sure.
That makes no sense.
Yeah.
So I volunteered. I volunteered to say all those crazy, mean things in front of my two organizers. It
Yeah.
felt like something cracked in me. It's like, why am I doing this? I'm trying
Sure.
to sustain some semblance of reason. We can't just be out here doing stuff because we're trying to prove that we're not questioning Lynn's authority on things that are very questionable.
Yeah.
And that was happening a lot, like no thinking. You know what I mean? And that's
Sure.
a different topic than what you bring up, because what you were doing was from a different energy. But it was this idea of like trying to protect, like trying to stand up for something that we wanted to defend. But
Yeah.
we ended up putting ourselves in harm's way when we didn't need to, that crack on the head. And
Sure.
there's a thought I'm trying to get at here, but it's not coming out, so I'm gonna stop. But there's something I resonated when you told that story. And
Yeah.
for me, that brought me further into the organization.
Yeah.
It
It's
put more skin on the game.
yeah. Yeah. I know we got to end in a minute here, but like that's it's a good example, honestly, because it's just those compromises. You're like, well, is this that big of a change from what we were doing? There's a polemic. You can rationalize it a thousand ways, but there's a difference between our instincts, how we react. Now, I never heard that about the Klan thing. That's wild. But
It's
uh, but
crazy.
but I can relate it to other experiences I did see. Oh, we're just gonna do this one thing. Like, really? Like, I don't know. And like, it's easy to blame ourselves looking back and say, I should have spoken up. But everyone, like, or a lot of people were thinking that, right? And there was a that and that's a good example, right? There's this thrust of the organization and there's a thrust of us. And they contradict a lot of times. Like, wait a minute, what are we doing now? We're doing this?
Yeah.
For a lot of people, the mustache was like, no, no, I'm leaving. This is too much. Like how do we get to this point? And it's that like, and so a lot of the question of like people's stories that I found in this show and just talking to them is kind of just how they join, and then what were the causes for them leaving, And
Mm,
to me, it's all of that same thing. And that's, to me, bringing back to mythology, that's the difference. The hero's journey, crossing paths with the tragic force.
mm, mm.
So that might be a good place to end it, just because I know we're coming up on the clock here. Might be a good
Yeah,
time. And
that's
honestly, yeah, I loved, of course, I'd love to have you back because I think we have a lot more to talk about.
you know
But
what
this,
it is? Go ahead. I keep cutting you off, but
no, no,
I just the thing about this conversation is I do not want it to end. I feel like it's just starting, and it
I
makes
know.
me want to just talk to you more often, you know?
Yeah,
There's a part of me, it's a small part, that's using the interview as an excuse to talk to my friend. And it's nice that, we can talk this way, and it's
yeah.
nice that people benefit from this type of conversation and they say nice things about it. It means a lot to hear that. It really does.
Hmm.
But it's just an excuse for me to talk to my friend, really. That's
Yeah.
kind of how I think of it. But it's like it would be nice to just talk to you because the reflections you have about things is so insightful. I'd like to hear more about your story. Like, it's nice talking about me and all this other stuff. And that's just a good excuse, though. Like, I kind of want to just hear
Thanks.
more about how you think about things. And like, you only briefly talked about your experience. Like, maybe I can do an interview and interview you. Like,
Sure,
let's
man.
hear about you,
Sure,
Spencer.
man.
Like, I
I'd
love to hear your story.
I'd love that. That'd be fun. Yeah, it was Luke Trudell in his interview. I didn't know, just for like for my audience that's considering coming on the show, just as an example, Luke Trudell, I knew him in the organization, but when we were discussing doing the show, I really did not know where he was at, where he was coming, what he wanted to discuss. I'm like, sure, you want to come on the show? Like, happy to have you. And it's more like was exciting for me, you know. And more wanted to hear about my story. I'm like, okay, sure. Like, let's sure, I'll give you some of mine.
Yeah.
But no, I feel the same way. It's been useful for me because it also has been an excuse, of course, to talk to you, which I love, but also just to reconnect with other people. And it was more like kind of that earlier point. I was able to put out like, hey, like I'm kind of neutral in a lot of ways. Like I recognize there's a lot of nuance to these stories. So I'm happy to like bring other people on so they can share their experience. And I'm not going to judge. I try to not be a judging person. But definitely a big thrust of it has been like, this is a fun excuse for me to reconnect, because it's just like, I don't know, feeling timid about reaching out. Like, I don't know where they're at. I don't know if they're going to see like, oh, you're from an old part of my life. I don't care.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean.
But more of it's been very positive. I'll say this. Like 98% of this whole experience for me has been positive, and just reconnecting with people and just seeing where they're at, and just, yeah, like, I don't know, it's been great reconnecting and sharing the story. It's such a good story. It's not my story. I'm a part of the story, and maybe my part is just the storyteller or like the host, to host it all. Um, yeah, different kind of documentary, really, is what this is, you know. But
Hmm.
no, so it's great. But yeah, we should probably end it there. If you have any final thoughts.
There was this poem that kept popping up in my head that um, one of the members in Canada wrote when I was first coming around, and it's very beautiful. He wrote this. I still have it on my sketch pad. I don't know. I gotta see my screen here. This is the sketch pad I had when I was a newer member.
Mm-hmm.
This one here, and when I was new, this is the one I was joining. I was drawing. I would always have these drawings of like us singing,
Mm-hmm.
like that's one of the members there playing the piano and
Uh-huh.
a drawing of me when I was singing back when I was really deep into classical art. And I remember this guy, he was a poet and he was coming around and he'd always get close to me when I was drawing and he would like, we'd have really good conversations. And he showed me one of his poems he wrote, which is beautiful. And I just feel like this kept popping in my head. It's what boon is wisdom to the world when secretly preserved? Instruct the crowds who have it not, then wisdom is well served. And I think that's what pulled us in. That's the call for the hero that
Mm-hmm.
we all were going towards.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's a fitting end to this discussion. And I agree with you. it does make me want to talk for a few more hours. And so, as soon as we can get it back again to talk, I would love to, of course. But we'll leave our audience wanting more, just as we'll leave ourselves wanting more from the discussion, you know.
Yes,
So
sir. I like that. I like that.
so thank you for watching. Um, yeah, appreciate you coming on, man. It's always a pleasure. It's always a joy.